Hello, everyone, and welcome. Thank you for joining us this evening. I am Kaylee. I'm the communications specialist for the Statler College of Engineering at WVU. We're so excited to have our very own alumna, Emily Calandrelli, the space gal, here with us tonight. Emily, welcome.
Hello.
How are you
Thanks
doing
for
this
having me.
evening?
I'm doing good. I'm doing pretty well.
We're so excited to be able to have a Q&A and have some of our alumni, current students, prospective students, engineering campers, and fans of Wonder Lab to be able to have a conversation with you this evening.
Yeah, I'm excited
Um,
to chat.
so you've done a lot of incredible things since you left WVU. And I'm sure, like I said, we've got folks tuning in who are current aerospace engineering students, fans of Wonder Lab, space aficionados, and everything in between. So we're going to touch on a few different topics tonight.
Yay, I'm excited.
Before we get started, everybody who's joining us via the Zoom, you can put your questions right into the Q&A and our moderators will hopefully get to all of them. And if we run out of time, Emily has wonderfully agreed to answer a few extras if we go over. So thank you so much for that, Emily.
Mhm.
So you've done a lot of press lately because you're going to space. And in one of your recent interviews with space.com, you shared that you didn't actually see yourself in science when you were a kid and that your interest in engineering came later in college. Can you talk a little bit about your experience at Statler and what helped spark that passion?
Yeah, so when I was a kid, I didn't know any scientists or engineers. I just didn't see myself in those fields. And the way that I got into engineering was really for practical reasons. So I've talked a lot about this, but my dad grew up in poverty in West Virginia. And so he really taught us the importance and just the happiness that comes along with financial security, not having to worry about money and just the relief and like the anxiety that leaves your entire just life when you have that financial security. And so when I was a high school senior, I literally Googled all the majors that one could major in college and I looked at their starting salaries. And that is how I decided to go into engineering. And it's a different story than a lot of my peers because especially when I got to MIT, a lot of those people would have parents who were professors of engineering who worked at NASA, who brought them to space camp or brought them to a rocket launch when they were a kid.
Right.
And I did none of those things. And so for me, I got into Statler because I was like, I want a good job. I want to be able to provide for my family. And I got there and I discovered this awe, this joy, this adventure that comes along with studying science and engineering. I got to intern at a couple different NASA centers. I did research as part of a fellowship in China. I was able to do all of these things. We went with Engineers Without Borders at WVU. We went to Mexico and did a project there. I did microgravity research on the Vomit Comet. Like the adventures just never stopped, and my joy never stopped either. And so my story of getting into science is one of sort of reluctantly joining engineering and thinking it was going to be hard and boring and I was going to hate it to enthusiastically staying and becoming obsessed with it and trying to share that joy and obsession with people, younger people especially, who may not see that just yet.
Beautiful. Well, speaking of sharing that joy with younger folks, we're going to jump a little bit to talking about Wonder Lab. Can you share a little bit about your intent or your focus for making Wonder Lab and how you made that a reality?
Yeah, so when I was graduating from grad school, I became the first woman in the United States with a nationwide science show. And when I did that, I don't think I realized the newness of that. Like I didn't realize that most people had not seen a female scientist on TV in that way. And so when I became the host, I started getting a lot of messages from families who were grateful for the representation that I was providing, how it was changing their household conversations about what a scientist and an engineer looks like, what it meant for their daughters to see someone like that on TV. And it just sort of opened up this passion of representation for me because I was just doing my job. I was following an adventure. I wasn't seeking to do anything novel or groundbreaking. I wasn't trying to capture this first. I didn't even know this was a first at the time. But once I did, and I realized the impact it was having, I wanted to do more of it. And so, ever since I started doing that television show, I started pitching science TV shows to big science networks. And the feedback that I got was unfortunately very similar. It was our large science network, not to name any, but our large science network, the vast majority of the people who watch it are boys and men. And we just don't know. I mean, this was verbatim exactly what they told me. We just don't know if they will relate well to a solo female host. And in one particular meeting, I was asked, well, but do you have a boyfriend or something who could co-host the show with you to make it more like palatable to our
Oh.
audience? And so, after years and years of pitching these adult shows where Hollywood just didn't feel comfortable with a woman talking about science to an adult audience, I finally was able to get in the door in the world of children's science television because Hollywood felt more comfortable with a woman teaching science to children. And so it wasn't a type of show that I sought out to do originally. I have 4 degrees in science and engineering. I had the credentials to bring science to older audiences, but it just so happened that the way that the industry kind of worked, they pushed me in this direction. And so, to be quite honest, when Emily's Wonder Lab came about, I was excited about it because it was a job, it was a project to do, but it was something I was a bit reluctant to do originally because I didn't see myself as a children's TV show host. I saw myself in a professional setting at an industry, and I didn't see myself as like a Pee Wee Herman type character. And so I was like, are kids even gonna like me? I have no idea. And so I did it. And I was like, well, this is quite fun. I enjoy this. I love kids. I genuinely love being around kids. And so this is a fun challenge. And then when it got out there, it was the best project I'd ever worked on. The response from it, from both families and educators and scientists alike, was all positive. It was like the holy trifecta of acceptance. And it became, it to this day is like the thing that I am most proud that I have created because now there is a pregnant woman. I was 9 months pregnant when I filmed it. A
Right.
pregnant woman hosting a science show in 190 countries and 38 different languages on the largest streaming platform in the world. And after that came out, we had girls dressing up as me for Halloween because they wanted to look like a scientist. We had kids all over the world doing Ryan's Wonder Lab birthday parties and Sophia's Wonder Lab birthday parties. They felt like science and like birthday joy were synonymous. They were having fun with science. And it was something that, that project changed my life. And I'm so proud of it.
Thank you so much for sharing that.
Mhm.
What was the timeline for you filming that? Because I'm imagining it. When did it air in
It aired
Netflix?
and it aired at the in the middle of the pandemic, like 5 months after the pandemic started, because the pandemic really got into full force in March, and then I think this aired sometime in like uh August or maybe a little bit in the summer. But anyways, it was like in the midst of the pandemic. And so for the families watching who are stuck at home, it provided this really useful resource that you could have one like guilt-free screen time. And as a parent who is trying to work and also like take care of your kids, guilt-free screen time is like such a gift. because it was very educational. Like I said, like the scientists of the world were very excited about the way that we were talking about science and approaching science education. But it also gave them activities to do because every single episode, I do this one big experiment with all my little scientists on the show. But at the end of the episode, I do an at-home experiment with materials you probably already have in your kitchen. And so families were given this idea that could fill an afternoon, a science activity that you could do for the weekend. And so to this day, I'll have parents and families come up to me and say, like, your show got us through the pandemic. Like, thank you so much for helping us get through that very difficult time for our family. So I think it came out at the right time. We filmed it a year before that time. So it was pre-pandemic. We had no idea what the world was about to change into when we were filming it. But it definitely came out at kind of a very useful time for families.
Yeah, I think as you mentioned, the accessibility of doing STEM activities and, kids and families trying to figure out being at home couldn't have come, at a at a more pivotal time. And I know it's been really, really incredibly meaningful for a lot of families. Sadly, the show was not renewed, which has been a trend, right, for a lot of live action kids shows, which is unfortunate. But it was it made an impact, and a petition gathered more than 75,000 signatures for another season. Can you share a little bit about how you dealt with that disappointment and kept going, what you learned about yourself?
Yeah, I think the main thing that I learned is that as somebody who prides themselves in or not prides themselves as someone who kind of grew up in a meritocracy. My education was very much like if you studied hard and you did well on the test, your grades would reflect that and you would be rewarded. But in the real world, like things are not as cut and dry. Oftentimes a decision gets made because a single person has a gut feeling about something and does or does not like a certain thing. And so like even 4 years later, Netflix came out with a transparency report that showed that Emily's Wonder Lab was in the top 16% of all shows and movies on Netflix. It was like Emily's Wonder Lab, which was 4 years old, and a new movie, Uncut Gems, which was like, 5 to 10 times more expensive to make. And so it is continuing to do really well, but we're seeing something in the industry, which is really unfortunate, is that most networks are only investing in cartoons because that is what they think that families want. They don't think they want like real humans. They think they want cartoons. And also cartoons don't age. Cartoons don't typically ask for higher pay season to season. And so
Right.
like for a number of reasons, they find it to be a smarter fiscal investment. And so these live action shows with real people, we're not seeing as many of them, even if they do really well. And so for me, it was a rude awakening for me, to be quite honest, because I was like, we worked really hard, we put our entire soul into it, and it did well. Therefore, there will be more. And that just wasn't the case. That's not how
Right.
Hollywood works. And so after waiting and waiting and waiting for them to renew it, because they never canceled it, that's not how the TV industry often works. They never say, nope, it'll never happen. It's canceled. Like the story is ended, chapter closed, you know? Instead, they say, well, not right now. And so you could wait forever for somebody else to make a decision that impacts your life. And it got to a certain point where I couldn't wait any longer for somebody else to make this decision. And so I took all of the ideas that I had, of which there were many. I had maybe enough ideas for like 7 more seasons. And I took all of those ideas and I put them into books. And I created the Stay Curious and Keep Exploring book series, which became a #1 New York Times bestseller. And then after those books did really well, I took all of the money that I made from the books and I hired a production company to make videos of all the science experiments that I wanted to put in Emily's Wonder Lab. And those will now come out on my own YouTube channel next month. And so for me, it's just a story of like, me taking control of my own life, being really excited about a certain path that had a dead end, and having to like be bold enough to kind of backtrack and go towards another path that I wasn't totally sure on. And that is not easy, because when one path already worked really well, you want to keep going on that one path. And like you could just like hit up against that dead end forever. And I didn't want to keep doing that. So now we'll see if the YouTube thing works. I've been told that YouTube is like a popular place for people to put ideas. And so now we will see if that works well for this audience.
Thank you so much for sharing that. And I think it's incredible advice for anyone of all walks of life, truly, to be able to start again and not let anybody else tell you what you can do.
Yeah.
Switching gears a little bit, as I think has been a through line for a lot of your work, can you talk a little bit about what it's been like and what it means to you to be a woman in a male-dominated field, and a mom balancing a thriving career, what you've learned and what you want to share about that journey?
Yeah, it becomes more meaningful as I get older. Because just like not realizing I was becoming the first woman to have a national science show, when I was just getting into engineering at WVU, I didn't realize that women were so few and far between. Because at my high school, which is in Morgantown, I went to Morgantown High School, where all of the kids who have parents who are professors at the university, they go there. So we have a ton of engineering professors who volunteer for the robotics club and the math club and like all these things. So we have, at my high school, we had an equal number of men and women, girls and boys in all of these programs. So when I chose engineering, I didn't think that that was a novel thing. I didn't think that that was like a unique thing for me as a girl to do. And when I got to college and I looked around, I was like, where did all the girls go? Why am I one of the only ones here? And it's not a WVU thing. This is like something, across any engineering program that you go to anywhere across the country, anywhere across the world. And I remember being really intimidated by that fact, because engineering is already considered to be like a hard major. I like to consider it more just like a time-consuming major. You just have to spend more time learning the things. Um, and then on top of that, feeling a little bit like an outsider going in, that made it a little bit even more intimidating. And so as I get older and I realize the value that being a woman visibly in this field and trying to show other girls and women that it can be done and it's fun and you can be yourself and hold on to the feminine aspects of yourself that you love. You don't have to let that stuff go. I find it to be a really fun role to be in and responsibility to hold on to. And so for me, it feels special to be able to be so visible in this role. And it makes me want to be more intentional with the way I present myself in public spaces. And so when I do my book signings and I'm meeting all these girls who love science, I wear these dresses and I wear pretty headbands and I wear a full face of makeup and glam and nails. And it's like, I embrace it all because I find it fun and that's authentic to me. And I don't let that go just because I'm talking about science, because there's no need to. And I just want to show other kids and other girls that whether it's femininity or something else that makes it authentic to you, that you can hold on to the unique aspects of your personality, even if you don't already see it in the room that you're about to walk into.
Mm, beautifully put. I think one more question, then we're going to turn to our Q&A. We've got some folks excited to ask you some things. So you've talked a little bit about the Rolodex of West Virginians that so many kids from the Mountain State know proudly, like Homer Hickam, John Knotts. Can you share what it feels like to be added to that Rolodex? To be
Well,
the
yeah, I don't think for me it doesn't quite feel. I think if I'm ever on the golden horseshoe test, that's when it's actually feel more solidified. So I don't quite feel like I'm among the West Virginia names just yet, but it does feel like it feels really cool to be mentioned among them. So for me, growing up, we would always memorize the Jennifer Garners and the Brad Paisleys of the world. And for me, it was Homer Hickam and Chuck Yeager and Katherine Johnson and Chuck Vest, who was a former president of MIT, and Wes Bush, who was the president of Northrop Grumman, and all of these aerospace legends who just happened to be from West Virginia. That was something that I held on to as a West Virginia kid because it showed that even West Virginia kids can be at the pinnacle of success in their fields. Like they did it. Maybe I can too. And Chuck Vest was someone I absolutely adored for a number of reasons. He's passed now, but he was the president of MIT. And he has this quote that's like, who would have thought that this kid from Morgantown, West Virginia would be getting dinner among like the world presidents and the Pope and just meeting all of these incredible people. Like, who would have thought? And it's something that is in the back of my mind when I accomplish these unique things. I'm like, who would have thought that this girl from West Virginia would be on a rocket going to space? Who would have thought that this girl from Morgantown, West Virginia would have her own Netflix show? And it's the story that brings me back home, but also just makes me feel so proud to be where I'm from, because in a sense, it's because of where I'm from that I was able to achieve so much. Because I think when you grow up in West Virginia, you have this grit and you have this community and you have this sense of perseverance that is common throughout the state. And those are the main resources that for someone like me, I leverage to be able to achieve what I have. And it was because I was from West Virginia that I was able to, get from wherever I started to wherever I am now. It's that West Virginia grit and perseverance that is just a crucial part of my story.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. All right, we are going to answer some of our Q&A questions. And this first one from Collier, I think that I love so much. What is one piece of advice you would give to a 9-year-old who wants to be an engineer, Emily?
So my favorite piece of advice to give to younger people, and it's advice that I wish that I had embraced earlier on. It's easier to say than do, but it's advice I wish I had embraced, is to have a really healthy relationship with failure. The people who I know that succeed the most have failed more. And to learn how to succeed, you must first learn how to fail. And it's because a lot of times, especially girls, when we're younger, the way that we sort of complement girls and boys differs slightly. There's been some research by a Stanford researcher, Carol Dweck, on this from the growth mindset, Carol Dweck, if people are familiar with that. And we talk about how with girls, oftentimes we congratulate the outcome. Like, you got it right. You're so smart. You did it. You're so smart. It's this like sort of binary outcome where we congratulate what they did, not how they did it. But with boys, it's oftentimes like, oh, you're so strong. You're such a hard worker. You did it. You're working so hard. We congratulate the process rather than the outcome. And that is much easier to replicate. When you meet a new, harder challenge, it's easier to replicate working hard than it is to be perfect. Because girls, oftentimes, when they meet a newer, harder challenge, if they don't think that they can get that right, if they don't think that they can be perfect, they often won't even begin the challenge. Because if they don't get it perfect, if they don't get it right, what does that mean? Maybe it means they're not smart anymore because they're taught that it's binary. It's based on the outcome, not the process. And so I think we need to teach all kids that the process is what matters. To work hard and to be okay with not getting it perfectly right is what matters, because there are so many things in life that you are not going to get perfectly right. But the trick is to try anyway. The trick is to learn why you didn't get it right, and the next time get a little bit better and get closer to getting it right. And the people who do that, the people who are okay with failing and they're just like, well, whatever, I'll try it again and maybe I'll get closer this time, they get closer the next time, and then the next time, and then the next time, and then eventually they get it right Whereas the person who stopped at the beginning, they're way back here. They never even tried from the beginning, even though they had the same set of skills. And so it's the secret of grit and perseverance and being resilient to failure that is the key to being successful in these like harder fields like engineering. And so I would just tell anybody who wants to go into these fields is to be okay with failure. Try something that you are not sure that you're going to be good at. In fact, try something that you're sure you're not going to be good at, because that is the only way to get better at something.
Apply some of that West Virginia grit.
Yeah.
Excellent advice. Can only fail upwards.
Yep.
All right. We've got another question from Piper. I'm only 5 feet tall, and everyone always thinks that I'm younger than I am. What suggestions do you have for exhibiting confidence and credibility as a young looking lady in engineering?
Piper, let me tell you, this is something that I've struggled with my entire life because as someone who is like 5'2" and quite petite, I always thought of myself as like the youngest person in the room, and I was often the youngest person in the room. And to sort of switch your mindset from being like, I'm young and I'm just here to learn, to like, oh no, I need to be a leader in this situation and command the room. I would say the only way to get good at that is experience and to continue putting yourself in situations where you're going to learn and learn from others, where like you'll see other people in your career where you're like, they are exhibiting confidence, they're exhibiting credibility. Like, what is it about them that I want to emulate? Because success leaves clues, right?
Mm.
Most people who are successful, they are stealing their ideas from other people that they have found to be successful in their career, and then it becomes their own. And so identify the people that you would like to emulate throughout your life and try to figure out what it is about them that allows them to hold a room, to command a room, to exhibit that credibility. Because sometimes it's simply experience and it's being there longer. But sometimes it's other things, like maybe it's speaking loudly, and maybe it's complimenting other people in the room, and maybe, it can be very specific things, or it can also simply be like they've just been there longer, and you should give yourself grace to be able to give yourself time to exhibit that same credibility. And for me, I think that's what I've learned, is that the times where I felt insecure, like I don't have enough confidence in this room, is because I didn't have enough experience yet. And eventually, you do. And once you know that you know more people than most people in the room, then it is quite easy to have confidence in that setting. And so I would say give yourself grace, give yourself time, because the confidence comes with experience.
Excellent. Excellent. I'm jotting all this down for my own life, Emily. I mean, confidence really makes it. And to reframe that as like, I don't have enough experience yet, I think is a really helpful growth mindset, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, Probably one of the ones that's burning in the minds of many of us from Dante. Can you share a little bit about your upcoming trip? Do you have a timeline on when you're going to space?
Not one that I can share, unfortunately. It
Fair.
is quite confidential. I mean, I do find it super interesting how tight-lipped everything is. Like, I am under very strict orders to not share basically anything. And so that uh that is all I can say. But I think what I can say is that I will be flying out of West Texas. Blue Origin has this beautiful, expansive facility, this launch site in West Texas, which is 3 hours drive from El Paso. It is like in the middle of the desert out there. And I'll go there a week before the flight to train for the flights, mostly a lot of safety procedures and just sort of understanding the experience. Because what I love and what I find really interesting is this launch is autonomous. There is nobody on board the rocket that is flying the rocket. It is the computer and the people back at the facility that are really monitoring and controlling the rocket. And so
Yeah.
everybody on board, Like they get to experience it in their own way, and we get to decide sort of how we want to use our time during the flight. And so it's a 12-minute flight. It's a very similar trajectory than as the one that Alan Shepard, the first American in space, flew. It's a suborbital trajectory, which means we don't go fully around the planet. We go up and touch space. We spend about 5 minutes in space and we come back down. It's why the rocket, the vehicle, is called the New Shepard rocket, because it follows the very similar trajectory as Alan Shepard. I was actually able to go to Blue Origin when Lauren Shepard was a passenger on the vehicle. That is Alan Shepard's daughter. So I was able to interview and speak with Lauren Shepard, who was the namesake of the rocket, who was about to fly in space to sort of honor her family's legacy, which was really cool to witness. And so now, you know, a few years after that experience, I'll be in her shoes. So I can't wait. It's not too far. So I think that we'll be able to like touch base not too far from now to talk about what it's like to fly to space. But I can't say much more about the timing than that.
All right, well, everybody stay tuned. We have one from Cameron that I think is a lovely question, and I would love to hear the answer. What does your daily schedule look like? Um,
Oh,
how long, you know, I think maybe you could share previously as a student. Now you're juggling a lot of things, parenthood.
oh,
Does it
yeah.
change a lot?
It's never the same. It depends on if I'm traveling, because I would say like because I have my own business, I have a bunch of different revenue streams. So it's my books, my speaking, my social media. Let's see, is there anything else? I mean, those are like the three main, oh, and TV, and the TV show host. So it's like the TV, the books, the social media, and the public talks. And so with TV, I travel a bunch. We're preparing for the next season of Exploration Outer Space, which I'll be traveling for. And then books I often write at home or in coffee shops. I'm in my kitchen practicing the science experiments, trying to figure out the best way to explain them and tell other people to replicate them. And then I'm usually like with social media, I'm filming in this room, I'm filming at my house. And so it's a lot of mix of both. But like yesterday, I took a few hours off because I wanted to recreate a math class for my daughter who's just starting school. And so every once in a while, I'll just like, find some activities that I want to do with my kids. And so it's a mix of a lot of social media work and book writing and speech writing and traveling and filming. But like yesterday, I spent the afternoon doing math worksheets with my daughter because I want her to have the same love of math that I do. And I was like, how do I do that? Well, maybe I'll go to Target and I'll get a bunch of candy and we'll have these like reward math cards that when she finishes 5 worksheets, she gets a reward card and then she can submit a reward card for a Hershey Kiss. And anyway, sometimes my afternoons are like super creative and like mom focused. And then other times, like this afternoon, I wrote a video about the Boeing astronauts stuck in space. And so I'll be able to explain kind of what's happening to my audience. But it's all over the place. It's never
Yeah,
consistent.
yeah, you're juggling a lot. We have a wonderful question from Julie. What advice would you give to children who show an interest in STEM but might not have the appropriate resources in their school or community to explore that curiosity?
This is when YouTube just really punches above its
Watch
weight.
Emily's Wonder Lab.
Watch Alice Wonderlab, but not everybody has a Netflix
Yeah,
account, so that's a tough one.
absolutely.
But YouTube, if you have internet, and internet's also not like an abundant resource, especially in certain places in West Virginia. But if you can get access to the internet, you can get it at the library, for example. Go to your public library, leverage the resources at your public library. YouTube has incredible science educators on there, everything from SciShow Kids to the Khan Academy, my videos, if I should be so, humble to say so myself. There's just a lot of really great resources, and you can find people who look like your kids talking about science. There's this idea that we're waiting for the next Bill Nye. I'm like a huge, huge super fan of Bill Nye. He's just done so much for our entire community and country and everything. But people will often, they'll look at my show and they'll say, you're the next female Bill Nye. And I think, like we don't necessarily need another Bill Nye. We need 1,000 Bill Nyes that look like the communities that we are trying to reach, that can speak to the communities we're trying to reach, that have expertise in various areas. We don't need someone who has a holistic knowledge of all of the different science fields. We need someone in biology and geology and climate change and space exploration and like immunizations and everything across the board, because one person cannot be expected to know all of those things all at once. And so anyways, on YouTube, you can find 1,000 Bill Nyes. And so that would be my advice.
Excellent advice. I have an interesting one from Cameron. Do you know, or can you explain from your experience at NASA how many jobs that are available that aren't maybe specifically related to aerospace? And if you
Yeah.
notice like demand for programming, robotics, can you share a little bit of your experience there?
Yeah. Oh gosh, that's a tough one. I don't know off the top of my head. I mean, most of the jobs at NASA are like STEM related, science,
Mhm.
technology, engineering, and math. But they also, if you're asking specifically for like non-STEM jobs like marketing and communications, those are all also like incredibly important and valuable. And NASA has just the most incredible comms team, and they're always hiring interns and positions for that as well. And so those would be the ones I would look out for. When it comes to like robotic versus human exploration, NASA has involvement in programs and jobs and everything from human exploration to robotic exploration to Earth-based exploration, like science of climate change and Earth observing systems, to solar exploration, sending spacecraft and probes to the sun, even to aviation. There are people who are specifically working to improve our planes and make them faster and safer and quieter and cleaner. And so if there's something in the world of flight and exploration that you're interested in, I'm sure NASA has a job open for you.
Excellent. I think we've got time for a couple more. From Henry, what was the phase of your career or education where you had to work the hardest, or maybe that was the most challenging, and what got you through it?
Man, well, I would say the part of my life that I think was like consistently the hardest in terms of time consumption, like I was just like constantly working, was college. I think was undergrad. Like I will reminisce about how hard I worked in undergrad and just how proud and satisfying it felt to just like consistently like work my way off to-do list from 9 a.m. to 9 p.m. every single day. Like I will just relive that high of productivity for the rest of my life. Like I loved how efficient I was at WVU. So that part was like that was the part of my life where I feel like I worked the longest hours. But now with my life, and I think so is the case for most adult careers, is I'll have sort of a mean of work that is like a steady state. And then I'll jump onto projects that have just like so much mental and energy, emotional energy, and work energy. And a couple of those cases, one was Emily's Wonder Lab, not the least of which is the reasons of me being 9 months pregnant at the time. Anybody who is listening has been pregnant before. That is not the easiest time to take on the most important project of your life.
I believe that.
So, and I was the sole science writer on the show. And so all of the science that you see in the show was my conception. I wrote the science. I scripted everything that I said. Everything that I say in the show was of my creation. And so that was a lot of work to just figure out all the science experiments, to test them, to write them down in a way that kids and families could understand, but it would still be accurate. And then to film it and then go home at 6:30 p.m. and then practice all of the science for the next filming day until 10 p.m. Go to sleep, have like not the greatest night's sleep, and then wake up at 6 a.m. and do it all again the next day, and just keep doing that and trying not to have a baby. So,
Holding it in.
filming, like, stay in there for just a few more days, until the project was over. And some of those filming sets were, it was in like July in LA. So we're in the middle of the summer heat in LA, and many of those episodes are filmed outside. And so I just remember being like, okay, this is hard. This is hard. Happy face. Happy face is a once in a lifetime opportunity. Buck up, bucko. Like, we got this. And so that was
It's showtime.
showtime. That was a little bit hard. And then the other period of my life where I felt like I really had to just like focus and just like grind away was when I filmed my YouTube series, because the only way that I could afford to do it, because filming a series of 100 videos at a decent quality of production is quite expensive. And so we wanted to film all of the 100 videos, actually 200, because we filmed a YouTube video and a reel, like a TikTok, within 2 weeks. And so we had to get all of the supplies and all of the script writing and just get everything. We had to film like 7, 8, sometimes 12 experiments in a single day. And it was like, it was very difficult. And keep in mind, like, as I'm doing this, and this is like, I think anybody can relate to this, even when you have another project, there's other things going on in your life that may or may not be going well. And so there would be times where I would blast like Taylor Swift's song, the I Can Do It With a Broken Heart. Like, there was like a professional project that fell through that I was really counting on, and I was like in tears that morning, and I had to like wipe my face off and redo my makeup and be like, everything's going to be okay. Everything's going to be okay. And then get into the studio and put a happy face on. And anyways, it's just when you have to be like that on for that long of a time, it takes a lot of energy. And it's energy that I was so lucky to be able to give, because I say this in the context of knowing that my job is a very privileged job, knowing that I'm doing something that I love and I enjoy doing, and it is more fun and more privileged than some of the like harder jobs that one can have. So putting that all in relative terms of this is like the hardest I've ever worked, because I recognize that like my job is quite a privileged one to be able to do.
But I think even like you said, touching on the fact that there's a behind the scenes and there's a good day and a bad day. And, you
Yeah.
know, all of
Yep.
our online, STEM learners are grateful for the effort, I'm sure.
I hope they like the product when it comes out on YouTube. I'll be anxious to see if people like the work.
Yes. Oh, we'll be tuning in. We have a special question, and I think this is going to be our last one to wrap up. This is from Evie. As a young woman who attends WVU now and was born and raised here in Morgantown, I sometimes struggle to think about having to maybe leave home because of a future job. Was it hard for you to first leave West Virginia? And if so, how did you cope with that? And what advice would you give to someone who occasionally struggles with this feeling?
Yeah, I would say I've always had like a very adventurous and travel forward spirit. So it's hard. It was hard to leave home for the first time, in the sense that it is always hard to go out on your own. But I will say, even though I've left, I found it really easy and really fun to keep and maintain my connections back home. And so even though I live an entire, like, I'm on the West Coast now, so I'm quite a distance away, I get back quite often, and I'm able to give back quite often. And so, yes, it was hard to leave, but it's also easy to stay, even without physically being there. And so I would encourage anybody who has a heart in West Virginia, who has a connection to West Virginia, even if they have to leave, to find ways to stay connected. Because the only way that we create a state where people don't feel like they need to leave is to try to bring the resources and the opportunities that we find elsewhere and try to distribute that wealth and opportunity back in our home state. So anybody who leaves, try to come back and share what you've learned with the people here so that we can eventually bring those dreams and opportunities and jobs back to our home state.
Well, on that note, our alumna and space gal who has taken such an incredible journey since you started here at Statler and at WVU. We're going to wrap it up, and I want to thank you so much for this wonderful conversation. I hope our viewers and fans have enjoyed getting to dialogue with you, and we're so excited to continue to follow your journey. If you would like to rewatch this, it will be on our YouTube channel, and you can find that link here. Thank you all so much.
Thank
Thank you,
you.
Emily. Have a great night.
Bye.